Good morning to you, and thank you so much for being with us on this very, very important day in the history of Uganda. Why is it important? It matters that you be counted so that as a government that is ensuring that left, right and center, it caters to you as far as your life is concerned, your health is concerned, your education is concerned, among other sectors that have to be given focal point. All these can actually make sense if they have exact data infrastructure that gets to support the budgetary processes that we see on the floors of Parliament being debated left, right and center. Why this much? Why not reduce? Now, when we have the census, all these are going to be changing. So in our Kickstarter, we're looking at the population dynamics in the planning process and the impact of the census in planning for a nation such as Uganda. I am Priscilla, Regina, Nalwoga, and you are most welcome. But also leave the door open for the enumerator to come in easily and knock and then get to interact with you as you continue with us here on Morning at NTV. Now, population trends and dynamics do play a powerful role in development and must therefore be factored into planning as well as policy decision making. They are the cumulative result of individual choices as well as opportunities, learning that real progress results when these choices and opportunities are enlarged rather than restricted. Rights-based policies should be complemented by efforts to anticipate and plan for population changes. And to this end, you do have countries needing to collect disintegrated population data on a regular basis and then use this data for planning at a national level, a local level, a rural level, and urban level. Now, to put this into context, I am joined by those that get the privilege of planning for this country on a daily basis and traversing it, realizing that there's areas that need more planning and there's areas that need as much data information as possible to guide in planning. And therefore, joining me for this conversation, I do have Dr. Bainomugisha. He's a policy analyst, but also with ACOD, and he's been with us here before, or is advocating, add this, increase that, and but where's the data to support the work and the advocacy that you are doing? You're most welcome to the program.
Thank you, and good morning, viewers and listeners.
Yes, and then next to him we do have Madam Amanda Ngabirano, Chairperson when it comes to the National Planning, Physical Planning Board. She is the lady that is steering national planning, urban planning. She's also a lecturer in that very same regard with Makerere University in the urban planning. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Priscilla. Good morning, viewer. Nice to be here.
All right, so let me start with a generic question. Why is it important to be counted, Doctor?
Thank you very much. It is important to be counted. After 10 years, I remember that we had the census in 2014, and this is 10 years after that. Looking at the population changes in this country, Uganda is one of the countries that has the highest population growth rates, so the population has changed. At the same time, we also realize that majority of our people are young people. So it is important that actually we understand the demographics of our people. Are they women? Are they girls? Are they the number of the aged? So that actually you can plan for them. But at the same time, Uganda is a welcoming country with one of the best or impressive refugee policy in the world. And so we have received a lot of refugees from these war-torn areas around in Africa and around the world. So that has also changed the demographics of this country. But of course, as a country that has decided to grow or to transform and modernize, looking at the Vision 2040, if you have to become a middle-level income country, then you need actually to plan and draw a pathway of how to modernize and reach there. So census is very important to enable your government, to enable those people that have been put in authority together with the citizens to plan for this country and transform it to a modern country.
All right. Amanda, Doctor here is referring to futuristic. It is important to plan so as to ABCD. But let's have an account of the past 8 censuses and how they have aided in the national developments that we see today in 2024. What has been their contribution to physical planning as well as direction as far as development is concerned?
Thank you, Priscilla. I think the most outcome of those previous ones is to have that strategic direction, as Dr. Arthur has mentioned. But in relation to physical planning, it's the need to plan for the land that we have. The need to utilize it efficiently has come out clearly, especially in the local governments, that land is a factor of production, and we need to have the key activities well laid out. And the local governments cannot do that if they don't know the population structure projections. They cannot plan for, let's say, social services efficiently, like health facilities, schools, if they don't know the size of the number of the people in that particular area. The physical infrastructure as well, you may not know the demand, what will happen where, who will need what, if you don't have the numbers. So I think it has aided the improvements that we are seeing in terms of the distribution of those services, but also the access of the services. So it's very key that not only the numbers of the people are known, but also their projected needs. If we are going to have, again, the youth being the highest population, what does that mean in terms of employment opportunities, and how should the local governments plan for that? What does it mean for housing? Where will they prefer to stay? If we are rapidly urbanizing, that means that the land values will go up, and will they afford the housing in the urban areas, for instance? So it's very critical, but it's also necessary. Going forward for this census, I think we need to look at the projection in terms of the global trends, global growth, aspects like sustainability of things, let's say energy. What source of energy do people use going forward? How do they access water? Do they have clean facilities for sanitation, solid waste management? All those aspects have to be captured to ensure that we have the sustainability also catered for.
Dr. Arthur, she has mentioned something about employment, and it's been one of the cries of the current population that we have, that by and large it has more a younger demography, but when it comes to employment, we've not seen that also benefiting the country. Instead, it's disadvantaging the country with increased crime rate, drug abuse, and things like that. And so it begs the question, for an underdeveloped country that is having a high population density and a high percentage of employable people but not in employment, how is that supporting the growth of the economy?
Uganda, fortunately we've had a youth dividend, and it's a blessing to have children. Children come a blessing from the Lord, but this, unless a country harnesses that youth dividend through, of course, skilling it and then deploying it to where it is well talented, it just reaps nothing. Actually, the youth dividend then becomes a burden on the country in terms of course, if there is a large-scale unemployment, then of course the crime rate, but also for countries like Uganda that is in a conflict-prone region, the Great Lakes region, if you have a large number of unemployed youth, uneducated youth, disaffected youth, angry, and then of course with poor politics, then actually they can easily fuel conflicts and sustain that conflict. So this census is very, very important. For example, now to understand the demographics around our youth dividend. Are they educated? How many are educated? In which skills? So that you actually are able to deploy them, but also to deploy them, also to train them in the areas that can be used to develop this country. So I think the unemployment must be a serious issue, not only for Uganda, but actually for the rest of Africa, because also even if you skilled your youth here, and then you have other youth coming in from the war-torn regions, they could still pull you down. And that's why actually this census, there are countries that have not carried out census, for example, but I'm glad that Uganda is now being consistent to know its population and plan for it. But it needs to also, we need to influence other countries also to do census so that we can even plan regionally and internationally. So unemployment remains very, very a serious risk for this country if we don't. I look at the border people, for example, most of the young people now have gone to border. But you see, yes, it's a temporary measure. It's a leadist approach. It's a problem, but you put a lead on it. They need to be skilled. They need to be trained in financial literacy, in integrity, how to even manage their money. Because I've not seen many of the border people that have actually progressed, broken that poverty kind of, that income bracket to another one.
Because even the traders were of the view, instead of adding more taxes to the small base, you have an opportunity with the border riders. Why not start taxing them? And ironically, you see every morning police arresting them for whatever reason they are arresting them, but yet it's a taxable base that is waiting to be milked.
Modernized, improved, skilled, then tax them. Actually, there are many. I think they are coming to almost 2 million.
Kampala alone, I think, now has about 90,000.
90,000.
Yes. Kampala KCCA, not GKMA.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
So actually, even if you tax them, even 50,000, 50,000, even like per month, you could generate a lot of money, but also impose some responsibility. Because you see, again, we have also been talking about, this census could help us also to come up with taxes that are targeted, but also progressive. Actually, we were discussing recently how, the graduated tax was regressive, was very hard to administer. It was removed, but its removal also affected our development. It affected revenue generation or mobilization, but also sent people to drinking, to irresponsibility. So we're thinking that maybe through this census, I mean, I don't know if that variable is there, she can help us, coming up with some direct tax that could put people to work. Because there's a lot of indigency, people not working, and they are paying tax, they don't know that they pay tax. So this census should also be able to identify those people that are not paying tax. If you are not paying the tax, you are not a citizen. Or you are a citizen, but you don't. But
you're a burden to the other citizens.
Yes. You don't claim that citizenry that actually tax confer to you, because when you pay your taxes, then you can demand from government better service delivery. And of course, this leads us to better service delivery. Of course, looking at this census should be able to identify areas that are poorly serviced, and then serve them, so that you can cause even development equity in terms of distribution. We target areas that are grossly underserved, like Karamoja. Just to return from Karamoja, it is. I hope that actually this census they will be able to do a thorough, the rich people, because it's a bit insecure. Insecurity could be a challenge here, but doing clear census and then clear targeting of the programs to bring that part of the country up in terms of development is going actually to be a multiplier in terms of development for this country. There's a huge potential that is locked up in a place like Karamoja. Then of course there are places like northern Uganda that is emerging from all that a post-conflict kind of environment, also locked potential, but also deserving different kind of targeting in terms of development. So this census, I think, should be able to help us unlock the potential, rekindle, mobilize our people to development. And I think the message also is to our people that don't accept misinformation, that the census will lead to more taxation, but actually this census is supposed to help us plan better, deliver better services, target programs like PDM now, because also one of the challenges of PDM is actually
statistics are outdated. Also,
poor targeting. You find that the whole country is treated as the same. Villages are receiving like the same amount of money. So this is going to show us where many people are, where few people are, where more problems are, so that actually target better a program like PDM to deliver on its
Okay. On the side of the National Fiscal Planning Board, you get to have to work with statistics, data, you get to work with accuracy, and you also get to do a lot of mathematics in how you dispense your duties. And on a national level, when it comes to some of the things that have come up over the course of these last 10 years, we've had more urbanization growth that has been coming through. And it begs the question, what has been supporting urban growth. Then two, we've had more cities that have, more towns that have been awarded city status, and they need to be developed accordingly. And I think this is a good opportunity for the board to then speak into and advise and direct for that kind of planning. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, you see, Priscilla, for the last 10, 15 years, we've seen that planning has not moved at the same pace as growth and development.
Okay.
And urban growth does not really mean development, because the urbanization quality determines how the results manifest themselves of that growth.
Okay, let's paint a more relatable picture when you say that when there's urban growth, does not necessarily relate to development. For example.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming to. Yes. The quality that we have experienced for the last 15 years is negative quality. It's poor quality. But that we call it growth because it provides opportunities for employment. The densities have increased. The built environment has also changed, but the efficiency, the quality, how accessibility is, for example, the access to social services, sanitation, the drainage aspects as a result of increasing population, the competition, the transport. You've been talking about borders. I remember I first wrote an article about them about 15 years ago, because one could actually project without the data that it's going to get out of hand because of the gap that was there, but the urgency and the need to move, which comes with urbanization. So the quality has not been good. That's what I mean by growth and development are two different things. So our growth has to be directed to quality, towards better quality in all aspects, because people are living, people have homes, but what's the quality of the homes? Earlier on, before we went live, you were mentioning something like utilization of land, which style, Indian style, Chinese style. You are basically talking about the occupancy rate, like compacting people in one room. People might live like that, like 6 people in one room, 1 bedroom. But that's not quality. They are not dead, but that's not healthy. They are living and surviving, but it's not the quality that we want. So those population issues.
It makes sense, because when you look at the real estate development, quality is dropping, but there's a lot of real estate development. But the housing units become smaller and smaller by the next building, and next building.
But even then, the real estate that we are seeing, we don't want to have urbanization which is encouraging sleeping places. We are encouraging urbanization that has compact developments, urbanization that has a mix of services, that people don't have to drive from their estate going to a nursery school, a kindergarten. The access, where should that kindergarten be in the context of a real estate development? What about shopping? Should people leave their estate coming to whatever mall it is, city center, to buy toilet paper, to buy bread? There has to be that quality that forces people to reduce their travel demand. And the reduction of travel demand saves us a lot. This really takes me to the fact of the National Physical Development Plan, which was launched recently. It is for 2040. Goes up to 2040, but the projections that we made are a bit worrying, because if by 2040 we're expected to be 60 million people, and probably by 2060 we are about 100 million people. I don't see the city of Kampala, for example, and Greater Kampala metropolitan area running with a transport system like this, which we have, with the numbers.
It will go back to the element of quality that you were mentioning earlier, that if the quality does not improve and you're having an increased population.
The quality and efficiency. If by 2040 we are going to be 8.5 million people in Greater Kampala area, I don't see borders, taxis running alone, but I still see that there's an opportunity for them to be improved upon, like you mentioned, but also to be maintained in the network, depending on the population forecast. If you want to introduce a bus system for the 8.5 million people, we need the data, because you can't introduce a railway line or a bus system where there is no demand. You need the numbers. The system will not run. It doesn't make economic sense. in terms of operating the system, but also investment in that infrastructure. We need to see a shift of efficiency in moving people, not moving vehicles. And that projection also requires the relationship between home and work, home, school, home markets. That relationship must make economic sense in terms of connectivity. So the National Physical Development Plan, actually you talked about Karamoja. I was smiling, but you didn't see my smile. Karamoja is like the future of this country. The whole northern of Uganda is where we can attend to our population needs with maximum assurance of success in terms of land availability, but also the ease with which we can reorganize the functions. It is really in the north. And if we want to introduce modernization of agriculture, like our president has been saying many times, and have a mechanized system with irrigation, with agro-processing, packaging, and export to South Sudan, to Kenya, to DRC. The north has all that connectivity benefits, and the space is still available. However, one aspect that Dr. Bainomugisha also hinted on is the quality of the population. Are they ready for change? How is the mindset like? So that pillar, which we refer to as human capital development, should not be neglected. And I hope that in the census, we can be able to focus ourselves on the outcomes of the census towards these national strategic pillars that we are looking at. That will help us to work with the projections that we have so far, but the urbanization process is irreversible. What we have to focus on now with the numbers is the quality. The difference between the rural and urban areas is also causing rapid urbanization, because people would like to have better access to services, better opportunities to employment. So they start shifting, moving towards the urban areas. But in the rural areas, if you look at the population projections, we are also going to lose that land, which we call empty, vacant. Because one has such a huge piece of land with a small unit, there's no productivity happening. That is really inefficient. But how can we introduce urban elements in the rural areas? You also need to know the population size, composition, and the economic production potential that they have, because each region is different. You will hear people talk about tourism city, which I actually find it a bit awkward, because each city, each region has all those aspects. You can go for tourism for Lake Bunyonyi, you can go to Sipi, but you can't call Kapchorwa a tourism district. So this is something a little bit aside, but every
also we should expand the tourism cities. That's what you're saying.
There are different aspects. There are protected areas where we have like the Choga Nile Basin. Then we have the natural resources that we're supposed to protect, forests. Some cities, some regions have a lot of natural resources compared to others. Then there is terrain aspects. So every region has a potential of tapping into one of those pillars of growth, including tourism. But then we need to know the population structure.
Okay, let's talk about urban refugee communities. Those have increased. People who live on Zambia, Gaba, Kansanga, Bunga. You now have to look twice to see, a fellow African. By African, I mean Ugandan. Because you have a whole migration of refugee communities that have in turn also contributed to the urban development in the area. And so, but when it comes to statistics, we're talking to some of the refugees. In terms of statistics, they don't feel included and counted, and yet it's going to be affecting physical planning. It's going to be affecting the quality that you were talking about, Amanda. How do you factor this in?
This is part of the urbanization aspect, because there is the natural population growth, then there is the pull and the push factors from rural to urban, But we also have those aspects like immigration, refugees, which Dr. Bainomugisha mentioned earlier on. That also can be a bit of a trick, because right now, for example, Adjumani is having those issues from South Sudan, that people are coming in and settling, and then they're exerting pressure on the social services, but also causing social tension. So what usually should happen in this, it's a matter of a national policy on such an aspect. When it is taken care of at the national level, it becomes easier for the local governments to accommodate that kind of population. It is always under the disaster and preparedness aspect of governance, but it requires also the type of population that is receiving them. I think Ugandans are quite friendly people overall, but the services now response to balancing the demand and the supply of such services in such areas is a matter of it's a matter of urgency, which one cannot even prepare for. You cannot predict. How do you predict that there will be war? It's about the level of preparedness to adapt, to adjust. This is why we are talking about resilience in cities. How resilient are you? Are you ready for any eventuality? Are you ready for hazards? Are you ready for immigration issues? And I think Uganda has proved to be quite ready. But it's not a good thing socially, because the services quality is going down, but the social tension also is coming up. So this requires a budget attached to that unit that is handling those aspects, which should trickle down to the local governments, because that pressure, like Adjumani, that pressure is being felt by the local government of Adjumani.
Okay. Doctor here is one that has tried to influence policy on a national level here and there. When it comes to national policies on such matters, for example, especially in trying to make sure that there's a balance of utilization of resources, there's also a balance in really harmonizing of populations, different as they may be, but at the end of the day, they're all in Uganda. And as the government of Uganda, it's their responsibility to take care of everyone under their bracket. And so it begs the question, what are some of those national policies that through this national census will need to be revised in order to re-accommodate the new population status?
Thank you very much. One, the refugee policy of Uganda is very accommodating and actually welcoming. But when you look at its sustainability, I think this census also should help us to know how many refugees are, because actually we have so many porous borders and people sneak in and they are not registered as refugees. We just see the numbers grow. They also bring in their relatives when the prices become very good. So actually this country may not accurately know the numbers of refugees. Refugees are not essentially negative.
Let me interject you there. There's one of them that was telling us about one of the apartment blocks that they entered. So as you've said, they come one and then the next thing they bring family. And so there was only one Ugandan left on that apartment block. So someone from the other side approached him and asked him, "You're Ugandan?" Yes. So why are you on this apartment if you're Ugandan when the rest of us are from, Somalia, Eritrea? And so they're like, how come you are here and you're not refugee? So it makes sense what you're saying.
Yes. So we have many refugees that have sneaked in that are not registered. And because they are not registered, it becomes also difficult to plan for them. I'm saying it's a good welcoming policy, but should not be abused. And therefore, this census should get us to understand the refugees. Who are they? Where do they come from? What skills do they have? By the way, some of the refugees have skills that actually as a country we can tap into. Some of them are highly skilled. Some of them have the money and they can become investors and could get jobs. But one of the policy, I think the refugee policy for this country may need to be reviewed soon, because it may not be sustainable. In a sense, for example, Uganda gives land to the refugees so that they can be self-sustaining. But the amount of land that we started giving the refugees has been reducing in size. I think if it was 2 acres, it's now an acre, even an acre being subdivided, and cannot sustain a family. And therefore, they will not be able to survive on that piece of land. So the refugee policy needs to be reviewed. But secondly, burden sharing. The refugee policy should be able to actually have other countries, the international community, to share this burden, because Uganda alone cannot shoulder this responsibility. If you went to West Nile, there's been so much pressure on natural resources, especially forests that have been degraded, wetlands, and of course social services like education, where children are sharing, and the health facilities. So that is the community. Ugandans now, yes, good heart, but now poor services. So there's a need for cost sharing by the international community. I think another area that needs to be looked at is going to be the whole budget architecture. I think the budget architecture to respond to some of the challenges because of the demographics. Yeah. For example, you realize that our budget is very small when it comes to natural resources and environment. And yet, Uganda still remains a nature-based economy. We are too natural resource dependent in terms of agriculture. 80% of our population in agriculture, exerting a lot of pressure on it, and then of course triggering climate change. And that actually our natural resources, our land, may not sustain this increasing population whose farming systems have remained poor and stagnated. So if it's agriculture, we must modernize agriculture to feed the increasing mouths to feed. So the budget architecture needs to be tilted a bit, but also physical planning that is talked about. This is a country that has not actually emphasized the planning. If you look at the means of finance planning,
if anything, the planning has become distorted.
The planning function is very, very small. It's suppressed. Yet I think planning should lead financing. So you have a good plan, then you finance that plan. So I think this budget also should be able to tilt that actually we put forward planning for this country, planning for the population that's increasing, planning for housing. I'm told actually we have like a deficit of 20 million houses in this country, but I think this is not empirical. We need evidence on that so that actually investors, you talk about real estate, can follow that. Because you see, a good census can also attract investment, can create jobs. Where do you invest? So for me, the change, the physical planning, the planning of this country, lifting it up above money, above finance is important. But also staffing, attracting top talent and putting them in place. For example, as she said, urbanization is unstoppable. People want better lives, and they think in the town, even if you are living in a slum, there is electricity, there is water, but you can also go to Chibanda and watch a movie. So the life is better, even if they don't sleep very well. So because urbanization is unstoppable, therefore we must plan for urbanization. But also urbanization is development, and urbanization will save our environment. Will save our environment. Will it save our environment?
We are having Masaka Road getting
no, urbanization will save
holes in the road.
If you went to Kabale, where people are scattered everywhere. If you went to in the mountain tops or hill tops, if you went to Mbare, where the settlement patterns are and leading, of course, to landslide and death of our people, if there is proper planning, those populations will be brought down, and actually, and the cities should emerge well planned. Where, as she said, you can.
Yeah, because we keep asking ourselves the question, and something that she mentioned about disaster preparedness.
Yeah.
If it has been stated by the data that you have these 40 areas that are hotspot for disasters on an annual basis, then why is it that people get to settle in those places still? Even with the mudslides, they'll go back and resettle in those same locations. It shows the imbalance in the planning that you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. But I think now then government must be in fact now armed with that. And I'm also saying that census should not be just for the sake of it, that it's 10 years. Let us conduct a census, and it's very expensive. And I like this one. It's very multifaceted. It's so many elements that actually we can collect all this data and put it together. And if you want anything, you can go there and mine from this data and use it for development. So, the point I'm making is the question is that actually planning, that this census should help us now prioritize planning, and then planning lead financing, and you are going to see a lot of progress. I think we would make a mild, quicker wins in terms of development than if we do sluggish planned development.
Okay, Amanda, which particular I believe that you've been able to maybe look at the questionnaire, and I ask the question, which particular elements that are critical in guiding physical planning for the country moving forward?
The access to social services is very critical.
Okay.
The level of education also is very, very critical, and the numbers of the people in the household, it's also very key. When you look at those areas, they give us the data that we actually want for every aspect of the census. But if we are looking at the urbanization rate, Doctor, it will not save our environment if uncontrolled and unguided.
Urbanization.
Yes.
Urbanization must be planned.
That is the only way that we are going to tap into this data that we are going to collect about education, the numbers, the type of house that people are living in. Do you own a car, for example? And I think that information cuts across to all the services we've talked about: health, education, which have a physical planning perspective, not only in the location of those services, but also the distribution and the hierarchies of the services that you need. This urbanization we've talked about Kavali, for example. Imagine someone staying up there and they have to fetch water from down. They have to go down the valley to buy tomatoes, onions. What are they doing in the mountains? You know, and even it is destroying.
No, because you know, rainy season, for example, it's been raining since September. If they're up the mountain, could they be safer than them being down the mountain?
You know, when you get that data, you really see that there has been betrayal of the citizens when it comes to fiscal planning and its benefits. And this is why we have to tilt this perspective and take it back to spatial planning and organization. It cuts across everything. You talked about security and having a regional perspective to planning. What is happening in DRC? What is happening in South Sudan? And then what is happening in Tanzania? All that is important. What is happening in Kenya? But who should do that? That has to be at a strategic level. So actually the National Physical Development Plan has brought out those aspects very clearly to do with the population projections. Again, if you go back to Karamoja, you see that we look like we have land, but the arable land that we now have is not going to be adequate for the nation and the population projected even by 2040. Even with applied technology, the modern farming methods, it may not be adequate. So what does that mean? If we get this data, what people do as a main source of income, what their daily activity is, if it's agriculture. You talked about multiplying the agricultural land. How is it going to multiply? Because land is fixed. We shall not multiply it and increase its size, but we can maximize its utilization. And that means that we must aim at balancing up the different functions. It also means that we are going to encroach on some lands, like the grasslands, which look like they are national parks. They are all empty. Should a national park be that huge, for instance? What about the seasonal wetlands? What will happen in future? Where will the extra agricultural land for the projected population come from to feed the nation, but also to contribute to the GDP for agricultural production? The only way will be to balance up the different land uses according to their function to the GDP, their contribution to the GDP. Now, agriculture is going to be a very sensitive aspect when it comes to population projection. if we don't encroach on some existing lands carefully, these grasslands, we have seen them. Mbarara, you drive from Masaka, you see empty lands. You go to Karamoja, almost all of it, you see empty land. So to create, for example, 100,000 square kilometers of extra arable land, we must reorganize our functions, and we must also seek a balance between the existing land and what we need by 2040, for example. And this data can really come from this population census. I find that it's too broad, like he mentioned. There are a lot of things that are being asked. So it's going to generate a lot. My worry is if we are really going to pick out the key critical areas of focus for the next, say, 50 years. And also the other aspect is how we harmonize that with the physical and non-physical aspects of planning. So physical is mostly about the physical investments of infrastructure network, the hospitals themselves, the schools themselves. But the non-physical aspects, which physical planning may not control, will come from the other sectors, like Ministry of Education. And then also when we talk about the people-oriented development, it should come out in a way of focusing on community needs. Then the place-based oriented approach of development should also be guided by the numbers that we are going to get.
All right. Finally, also this presents us as a country an opportunity to evaluate government programs that have previously been implemented. For example, in the education sector, supporting the girl child to further their education. You do have the skilling programs, the MIOGAs, left, right, and center. Doctor, as we close this conversation, how does this present an evaluation opportunity for if these programs worked or they didn't work?
Actually, you said it. This is an opportunity for government to find out whether the interventions for development or to solve certain policy issues have worked or have not worked. And therefore, it becomes important for government then to review, to refocus, and to target those programs. For example, NADS, Yoga, Youth Livelihoods programs, now PDM. Now PDM is the elephant in the room. I think this is a program for me that has an opportunity for Ugandans, but it needs to be well designed, well targeted. So this census will help us actually to target it for better results.
All right, I'm going to allow my guests to return to their places of comfort that they may be counted this morning. But thank you so much, Dr. Arthur Bainomugisha and Madam Amanda Ngabirano. Thank you so much for your inputs, and we trust to see the results thereby as the time goes by, with the data infrastructure being improved for the country's national planning in all areas. We expect a better country moving forward.